Hello, my beautiful mythical old souls, and a huge warm welcome back. In the somewhat weird and wonderful world of lucid dreaming, there's something that's most fascinating of all, and it's the way it provides a portal to our inner self. On the show this week, I'm joined by lucid dreaming expert Robert Waggoner.
Robert has had more than 1,000 lucid dreams and has taught workshops on 4 continents, helping people to learn how to become lucidly aware in their dreams and then use this unique state to access inner creativity, promote emotional and physical healing, engage a responsive inner awareness, and more. We explore the ancient, mysterious, and transformative world of lucid dreaming, diving into the science, spirituality, and then focusing especially on the deep personal revelations that can arise when we become consciously aware within the dream state. Robert shares his extensive experience uncovering the ancient origins and scientific validation of lucid dreaming, while highlighting its profound potential for self discovery and personal growth.
And before we dive into all of that good stuff, if you're struggling with walking your soul path in this crazy modern world and would benefit from guidance, kinship, and support, come join our Academy of the Soul, Unio. You can find out more and join us by hopping on over to bemythical.com/Unio now or click the link in the description. And now back to this week's episode. Let's dive in. Hello, Robert. A huge warm welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And I'm really excited about the topics that we're going to explore. But before we dive in, I would love to hear a little bit about what drew you to lucid dreaming in the first place, because I know you shared it's been quite a while. What brought you to it?
Yeah, so as a young child, I just had a very active dream life, and my dreams were fascinating. I found them incredibly compelling, and I realized early on that on occasion I had precognitive dreams. Like within the dream, someone would say something very unusual. And then 5 hours later, when I'm awake on the playground at school, someone would say those exact same words. And
Wow,
so
the
I,
same
I
person,
became,
or it could be someone else,
yeah,
but the same words.
well, it would be the same words, by a young playmate. So I began to realize, that dreams are beginning to show me that things aren't exactly as they seem, and so that
Mm.
was very captivating. But then it was when I was in high school, I began to read a book by Carlos Castaneda called Journey to Ixtlan.
Hmm.
And in this book, his shamanic teacher, Don Juan, suggested to him that he try to find his hands in the dream state and realize he was dreaming. And I thought, you can do this? And so I created my own special technique. And within 3 nights, I had my very first lucid dream. I became consciously aware within the dream that I was dreaming. And then I was able to explore and experiment. And ever since then, that was back in 1975. Ever since then, I've been a lucid dreamer.
I can feel the delight of you back then having your first lucid dream. Like as you're speaking about it, I can feel there's still passion there.
The interesting thing, I would tell my young friends that I was becoming aware within my dreams. And they would say, oh, you can't become conscious in the unconscious. They'd say, you're having a dream about a dream. And I'd go, no, I know I'm dreaming. I can decide what I want to do. I can manipulate things and all. But it wasn't until 5 years later that the scientific evidence emerged. And I was one of the happiest people out there when the scientific evidence emerged, because finally I could point to the science of lucid
Mm.
dreaming.
Oh, so let's get into that because I know that you have a real, I guess, reverence for the science of it, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so what happened? So I was a psychology student in the university and a major, and I think it was a January 1981, Psychology Today magazine had an article by Stephen LaBerge, who was a doctoral student at Stanford, and what he had done to prove the existence of lucid dreaming he brought himself into the sleep lab because he himself was a lucid dreamer. He realized that in regular dreams, we have rapid eye movement. And so he thought, what if he put rapid eye movement pads on his eyes? And while he was in the dream state and became lucid, he would move his eyes left to right 8 times. And that would be recorded by the rapid eye movement readout. And it would validate that people were becoming consciously aware within their dreams and they could do things. And so
not dreaming that they were becoming consciously aware, but actually becoming
right. There'd be outside evidence that this interior event was occurring. And so he published his first paper and began to write about it. Also, I realized later on that Keith Hearn at the University of Hull in England had come up with the same basic experiment 2 years earlier with a lucid dreamer, Alan Worsley, there in the UK. And Alan Worsley, I think it was April of 1975, he signaled in the sleep lab with his eyes that he was consciously aware within the dream. And so that was fundamentally the very first scientific evidence. But Laberge published his material in more widely read scientific journals and kind of became identified with the scientific movement of lucid dreaming.
Oh, fascinating. And also suggests that perhaps lucid dreamers think alike. So I'd love to know what else has been discovered since. What other studies have been done and what do they tell us about what's possible, what's happening with lucid dreaming?
You know what? One thing I wanted to mention that oftentimes people wonder how many people are lucid dreamers. And so when they do widespread surveys, they'll find that about 50% of the population can report a lucid dream, that they became consciously aware within a dream, at least one. But then they ask, how frequently do you have lucid dreams? That's when you get to about 25% of that group will say that they have lucid dreams about once a month. And so that's what you find. Another thing, there was a study by a woman, Ursula Voss in Germany, and she wanted to know, when does lucid dreaming begin? Because people have spontaneous reports of it occurring without ever being trained in it or learning about it from outside sources. So she went to a school of 694 German school children, ages 6 to 19, and she interacted with everyone that stated they had had a lucid dream just to confirm indeed that they had become consciously aware within the dream. And what's interesting when you read her survey is that 25% of the 8-year-olds had already had a lucid dream. But again, in our society, we don't talk about dreaming very much. It's kind of culturally ignored or devalued.
Yes.
And so the reason I think this is important is that lucid dreaming happens spontaneously, naturally, occurs in young children. And she found of the entire group of 694 German school children, 51% had already had a lucid dream by their current age. So again, lucid dreaming happens, it's natural. And if you know how to go about it, you can learn how to have more lucid dreams. And also you can learn about all the amazing things that you can do within a lucid dream.
So that study, I guess, begs the question, if it is natural and self-occurring, why is that?
Right. So that's a wonderful question. Think about a normal dream. In a normal dream, you just accept. I accept that I'm in Paris, and I accept that that's a dinosaur coming around the corner, and I accept that I've got to run and tell my family, we got to get out of here. There's a dinosaur. So in normal dreams, we just react to what's happening in a very uncritical manner. We just accept what happens. But in a lucid dream, you have a moment of, wait a second, why am I seeing my deceased mother? She passed away 10 years ago. Oh, this is a dream. I'm dreaming this. Or why am I seeing a dinosaur? Dinosaurs are, extinct. Why am I seeing this? And so you have this moment of critical awareness come about, which jumpstarts the lucid dreaming process and begins the whole activity. So basically, lucid dreaming is a type of dream-related mindfulness, if you'd like to put it in those terms. It's questioning things. Why is this occurring? This is impossible. Oh, this has to be a dream. And suddenly you're off and running in a lucid dream.
But why would that be? Why would that be? I mean, the way I see it with most things, we have them because they've in some way or other aided in our survival as a species. How would this have done that for us?
Well, so lucid dreaming has a long history. In Buddhism, it's part of Buddhist dream yoga for about 2,000 years. They use lucid dreaming, becoming aware within a dream, and then they marry it with Buddhist philosophy to explore the nature of the mind, the nature of the self, and so on. And so also in shamanic traditions and wisdom traditions for many thousands of years, people have used lucid dreaming as a way to gather information and explore. And so on the face of it, you would wonder, okay, like, why or how did this all come about? But I think the fact that it occurs naturally, there must be a reason why. And then the second thing is, lucid dreaming is a very long path. And I've been lucid dreaming for more than 45 years. And so it took me a long time to kind of have the realizations to keep expanding and growing lucid dreaming practice. So it takes a while to really grasp what's happening within the lucid dream in order to get the benefit of lucid dreaming.
Yes, which is one of the things we're going to get into, which I'm fascinated by. So I was saying to you before we hit record that really what we do on the show is all in service of helping people, guiding people, supporting them to discover and live their own soul's myth. And then you were saying one of the key gifts and benefits of lucid dreaming that you see is that ability to meet your inner self, to have conversations with them, to understand what's occurring, what you're being called to. And so that for me is probably one of the best benefits I can possibly think of. So I'd love to go there.
Right. So it's interesting in ancient Greece, oftentimes the idea of the psyche or the inner awareness is that they had 23 different words to express, the inner self, the psyche, and so this was something that I was not expecting on my lucid dreaming journey. So I taught myself how to lucid dream in 1975. The scientific evidence came out around 1980, 81. And then I think it was in 1985, I realized that within a lucid dream, in many respects, it reflected my mind, my beliefs, expectation, focus, and intent. So if I believed I could fly through that wall, I could fly through that wall easily in a lucid dream. But if I believed it was going to be troublesome, I would fly up to the wall and hit it and bounce off. And so I would see, okay, that doubt is being reflected in the lucid dream. So first, I think you have to kind of come to an understanding of how the dream reality gets created. And it's not just happening out there, it's connected to the nature of your own thinking, your own belief process and mindset. So that took me 10 years to get to that point. But then it was after that, I was part of a Lucid Dream Explorers group. Every month we had a goal to achieve in a lucid dream. And one night, one month it was
like a quest.
Yeah. Yeah, this went on for 3 months. So we had, more than 30 goals to achieve. So one month, the goal was find out what your dream figures represent when you meet them in a lucid dream. So I became lucidly aware. I followed a woman into an office knowing it's a dream. And now I see 3 women in the office and a gentleman dressed in a 3-piece suit. And so I go up to the gentleman knowing it's a dream and he's a dream figure. And I say, "Excuse me, what do you represent?" And suddenly something very strange happened. Instead of the dream figure responding, a voice from above him basically boomed out a partial response.
Oh
And
my
this
gosh, I've
partial
got
response,
chills there. That's
the
so
partial
wonderful.
response didn't make total sense. And so I repeated the partial response and said, "And what?" And then it's like the non-visible voice had to think about it, and then it responded that it represents what it represents. And so I said, okay, I've completed my goal in the lucid dream. I'm going to wake up and write this down before I forget anything. But the next morning I thought, why did this non-visible voice respond? Why didn't the dream figure respond? I expected the dream figure just to tell me, I represent whatever, but it's a non-visible voice. So then I began to wonder, is there an awareness behind the dream? Could you engage your unconscious mind directly by ignoring the dream figures, which are projections of mental energy, and just going to it directly, just ignoring all the observant projections and just asking a question of your unconscious mind? And so after that, that's what I began to do in my lucid dreams. So you could do this in a very simple matter for people who are listening who are lucid dreamers. Become lucidly aware, ignore the dream figures, and just announce, hey, dream, show me something important for me to see. And then suddenly the entire lucid dream might change, or there might be one element appear suddenly in the lucid dream. So that would be a simple way to approach it. I remember I was working with a woman who from the UK who used to run the website World of Lucid Dreaming. And she said she felt a little bit awkward about this. And so this is what she did instead. She became lucid, ignored the dream figures, and said, hey, dream, show me something hilarious. And then she said, suddenly walking down the highway was this multicolored gorilla doing this kind of groovy walk as it went along. And she said it was the funniest thing that you could imagine. And she just burst out laughing. But this is just the very beginning steps, because as I went deeper into this, I would ask to experience concepts. I would ask to get information outside of my own mind's knowing. And that's why I ended up titling my first book, Lucid Dreaming Gateway to the Inner Self. I think lucid dreaming allows us to consciously interact with an inner awareness. And what's interesting about it is...
Can I just jump in with... I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask you. One's a little bit of a side tangent, but I'm curious, which is, it may be that you've just kind of lost interest in this because of what developed instead. But I wonder, in lucid dreams, have you been able to have people behave in dreams a certain way? As in, in that instance, you were expecting the dream figure to respond and they didn't. Are you able to have dream figures respond, act in a certain way?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. And part of the trap of lucid dreaming, especially for beginners, is how much fun you can have. And so you can fly around, you can walk on water, you can, do all sorts of crazy things with dream figures. And it kind of becomes a trap, because then you stop exploring and experimenting because you're having so much fun. But right, you can.
It's almost the same lures and challenges of waking life, isn't it? Really.
Exactly. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, wonderful. And then the other question I was about to ask, which you may have actually been about to go into, I would love if you're willing to share some examples of things that you were shown, told in lucid dreams, and then how they helped you, the actions you took, what they showed up, how they showed up in your waking life, if you'd be willing to share.
Right. So as I began on this path of interacting with the larger awareness, as I would call it, I decided to test it and see how it would respond if I asked to experience a concept. Because a concept is kind of a different thing, And so here's what happened. I've been reading a book by Jane Roberts, She had very popular books here in the U.S., the Seth material. And in there, she writes about...
I wasn't clicking who that was. Yes.
Yeah. She writes about that everyone has a feeling tone, which is the essence of themselves in this life. And so there's just a paragraph or two on there. And I thought, a feeling tone, and it's the essence of yourself. So later that month, I became lucidly aware. I ignored all the dream figures, and I just shouted out, hey, I want to hear my feeling tone, not knowing what to expect at all. Suddenly, if you can imagine this, high above me, this little black dot appears. And coming from it is this very high-pitched ah sound. And as I watch in a lucid dream, knowing it's a dream, suddenly this little dot begins to make a conical form. And as the conical form gets bigger, the ah sound gets louder. And finally, this ah sound keeps growing and growing, and the conical form keeps growing until literally in the lucid dream, it's basically vibrates me out of existence. So then if you can imagine, this separate being is watching this vibrating cone of awe over there. And then this kind of separate awareness thinks, I should recapitulate that one. Now, which one was that? And suddenly it goes through its vast mind until it comes upon Robert Waggoner. And then at that moment, and I kid you not, at that moment, I found myself sitting in a lotus position, looking at the house that I was asleep in. I looked over at my fingers, and my thumb and index finger were glowing gold. They were in a mudra. At that time, I had no idea what a mudra even was. And I thought, what just happened to me? And I thought, oh, it was that feeling tone. And I go, whoa, not going back there.
Yeah.
That was energetically too much.
Psychedelics haven't got anything on lucid dreaming.
Anyway, so it was probably 3 years later, I came across a book on mantras. And in kind of a Vedic Hindu belief, everything comes into phenomenal reality or form by virtue of a sound vibration. And how does it begin? It begins with a little seed called a bija. And then from that, the vibration goes outward and brings about phenomenal reality. And so when I began to read that, I thought, I think by asking to experience the feeling tone, I had a conceptual experience of how sound vibration can express you or unexpress you or deconstruct you, going which way. Also, I did want to mention that
cut a bite off more than you can chew.
Yeah, well, see, that's the issue. But I did want to say before we leave this that later I started to read a little bit about Buddhist dream yoga, probably 10, 15 years later, and the sound associated with lucid dreaming in Buddhist dream yoga is the ah sound, is ah. And so they have various Buddhist dream approaches to initiating a lucid dream that involve ah. So it's quite interesting to have this experience. But that just shows you, all of a sudden in a lucid dream, you can transport yourself into conceptual experiences that are beyond imagination. It's beyond the ego conscious self, Robert. I mean, now we're entering new territory.
Wow. Yes, that's what a phenomenal example you've given, because that says something, doesn't it? It's like you could see that even within a lucid dream, and maybe even especially within a lucid dream, you're only going to kind of be able to see what's already in your conscious awareness, where that clearly wasn't.
Right. And I want to give you an example of how this is actually practical and helps people. So after my first book was published, about 3 years later, I got an email from a young guy, and he started out the email in a very strange way. He says, I'm writing to you as a former meth addict. And I go, okay, I'm getting emails now from meth addicts who have read my book. And he said what happened to him is that he grew up in a troubled family, and he was 16 years old, got addicted to meth, had to go to drug rehab. But after he got out, he just got back into drugs. And a few years later, he was caught doing something illegal because he was a meth addict and trying to raise money. So now he was back in the rehab, and he was bored out of his mind. And he saw on the drug counselor's desk was my first book, and he knew that he had had a lucid dream before. And so he asked to read it because he was bored out of his mind. And as he read it, he read that I talked about interacting with an inner awareness. And so that's what he began to do during his drug rehab. He would fall asleep, he'd become lucidly aware, and he would interact with his inner awareness. Finally, what happened is that one night he's lucidly aware, he reaches out to his inner awareness, but his inner awareness asks him a question. He says, the inner awareness, the non-visible awareness says, would you like to see what your life is going to be like if you continue using drugs? And the young man goes, sure, show me. And he said for the next 10 minutes, it was like watching a video of all the people he would hurt, all the damage he'd do to his body, all the misery that he would cause those people who care about him. And he said after he saw that, he woke up and went cold turkey. And so he said, I'm writing you now that I've graduated from a community college here in Los Angeles, because that takes 2 years. And I knew I'd have to be sober for 2 years to do this. And it's all because of this lucid dream experience where I was shown what my life would be like if I continued using drugs.
Oh.
And so there's incredible stories of people who have healed themselves of phobia. There's some scientific evidence how lucid dreaming has ended recurring nightmares from people who have PTSD and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to say that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that's accessible within lucid dreaming.
Goodness me. I've already got a sense we're going to need to come back and do a part 2, because I'd really love to explore what you touched on earlier about how understanding that we are creating our dream world is also showing us that we're creating our world out there, which of course is something that's been said over and over again in most of the spiritual traditions. But of course, having an embodied experience and gnosis of that is something else altogether. So I feel like I would love to perhaps go really deep in another episode, because I'm so fascinated with what we're talking about. I kind of want to stay here rather than go there right now. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. Also, in my second book, I have techniques that a non-lucid dreamer can use, a waking person can use, to see how they project energy that influences what they call reality, which is really perceived experience. And by changing your mind, you can change what you attract or what you experience in the waking world. You don't even have to be a lucid dreamer, but I include a technique in my second book on just that fact alone.
Okay, well let's call that a cliffhanger for our episode 2, and now dive back into all things inner self, because I think there is just so much here that is I know we don't have all day, but I could absolutely spend all day talking about this. So I guess there's yes, again, so many different questions I've got about this. What I'm interested in, I guess fundamentally, there's of course so many different ways that we can converse with our inner self, understand more about our inner self, whatever word we give to that. And what I'm thinking of right now is, for those of us that are in other work of that kind, which is going to be, I'm guessing, most people listen to this show, how can lucid dreaming kind of complement that and almost like allow us to go deeper into those practices? Like, say, let's just take shamanic journeying, which is one of the ways that's part of my background and one of the ways that I work with our students. How might we kind of use things like this together to allow us to go even deeper than we otherwise might?
Right. So So you're right. In some respects, a shamanic journey is kind of in a certain sense, kind of like a waking lucid dream. You
Mm.
know, you get yourself a little bit into an altered state, and then you journey, and sometimes you wake with information outside of your own knowing that later you can verify. And so that's one thing that I do want to point out, that oftentimes in my book I would use these experiences to get information outside of my knowing that later I could verify and confirm that they were accurate. So one thing I would say first, for just the average person, do we have an inner awareness? Do we have an inner self? And so if you're willing to concede the possibility of it, how would it communicate with the average person? And so I think it's one of the fundamental reasons for dreaming. Dreaming is a connection between inner reality and waking reality. It allows us. So why do we dream? Scientists don't know why we dream. How much do we dream? We dream about 2 hours every night. When you think about it, by the time you're 24, you've already spent 2 entire years in dreaming.
Wow.
Why, you're talking evolutionary. Why is this so important from an evolutionary standpoint if most of us in our Western culture just devalue dreams?
Well, that's
And I think
actually, that's so interesting. When I think of it, 2 hours, I mean, that's more time than, for example, most of us spend eating.
Exactly. And oftentimes dreams provide us, if we'll pay attention to them and really get into it, sometimes it'll provide us information outside of time. Sometimes it'll provide us with interesting warnings. There's been some wonderful books here in the U.S. Of a woman who, she was a woman who is a cancer survivor. And so she goes to her first cancer survivors group, and she begins to interact with the other people there. And she starts to realize that many of them, just like her, heard in a dream that they had cancer. And that's when they went to the doctor and discovered that indeed they did have cancer, and so on. And as she began to interact with them, sometimes it was deceased relatives would appear and tell them. Sometimes they would show them exactly on their body where they had it, and that the doctors wouldn't believe them. But if they explored that exact spot, they would realize that there was something going on. So again, how do we explain all of this? And if we accept the idea of an inner self, then we kind of get into a new relationship with the psyche. But to your point, the way we're connected now, no matter who we are, is we dream, and all of us dream whether we remember or not. And then the second aspect, I think we find it in spontaneous impulses, like sometimes spontaneous knowings, like we know something's going to occur. And I'll tell you that as I got deeper and deeper into lucid dreaming, I have more spontaneous knowings occur that are suddenly surprising. And then when they're validated, it's like, whoa, there was no way that I could have been informed of that in advance, but it occurs. So sometimes that spontaneous knowing.
Funny enough, I was literally about to ask you that very question. So I think you spontaneously knew I was about to ask you that. Is that something that you've seen more widely, or has it even been studied that people who lucid dream have a kind of, let's say, a more direct connection with their inner self outside of dreams than average, or it increases from before?
Yeah, that's a difficult one to respond to. I wouldn't really say there's anything that would, any survey or study that's really investigated that, so to speak, on. But I did want to say the other ways that I think we connect with this inner awareness is through altering our awareness through things like shamanic journeying or whatever, and also we do it occasionally in meditation. So one thing that came about, I began to occasionally meditate in lucid dreams. So I knew it was a dream, and I'd stop whatever I was doing, and I would begin to meditate. And I want to tell you that if you want to have incredibly transcendent experiences very quickly, meditate in a lucid dream. And to me, that means emptying my mind. But what other lucid dreamers have discovered is that if you begin to do your meditation practice in a lucid dream, after you've done it 5 or 6 times, then in waking reality, suddenly your meditation experience is much more quicker. What used to take you 20 minutes to get to a certain level, now in 5 or 6 minutes, you're getting there.
Oh, wow. That really makes sense. In fact, this links to something else that would be interesting to explore. So I'm guessing there's an aspect, I suppose, in a more material sense of those kind of neural pathways have been created that allows us to then do the same thing in waking life in meditation. Are there other examples of that, how we can kind of and it's particularly linked to our inner self. So rather than something random, but things that we could perhaps do, learn, embody, that are those kind of, deeper gifts, spiritual gifts that we can then take into waking life. Have you experienced any more like that?
Well, so like here would be an example. One time, my wife and I we traveled down the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon, and so it's a 7-day trip. You sleep out under the stars on the sandbars and all, and being out in nature, away from computers and cell phones and all that stuff. Being in nature, suddenly my dream life, and for me, this is incredible to say, but my dream life just really took off. And about every other night, I was having a lucid dream or whatever. But about halfway on the trip, you get to this beautiful Havasu Creek where they have this Havasu waterfall, and it's all just amazingly gorgeous, always photographed. So our boat stopped there. We hiked up the trail. My wife and I helped the most elderly woman, and so we were the last people to get in the creek. And so you're in this beautiful creek. The water is probably 80 degrees, and outside it's 100 degrees because it's Arizona. And as I was sitting there in a meditative state, I reached out to my inner awareness, even though I was awake, and I said, I reached out to the canyon, knowing that everything is aware and alive. And so I reached out to the canyon, and I did it just like I do in a lucid dream. I say, so canyon, what do you have to tell me? And I heard very clearly, just like you and I are talking right now, get out while you still can. And I thought, what? And I thought, am I hurting an aquatic plant? What's going on here? And I looked around and I thought, there's nothing going on. That was just a weird, some weird whatever. 5 minutes later, I'm back in that meditative state, and I reach out to the canyon again, and I say, so canyon, what do you have to say to me now? And now it was more emphatic. Get out while you still can. And I stood up in the street.
Chills each time you say that.
I told my wife and the other people there, I go, we got to get out of here. We got to get back to the boat. And they go, why? This is heaven. This water is silky and smooth, and this is just heaven. And I said, there's something wrong. We got to get back to the boat. And then if you can imagine, so you're in these kind of very narrow canyons, and I looked up and I could see just the tiniest bit of a thunderstorm appearing over, in the canyons. And I go, look, this thunderstorm's coming. There's going to be a flash flood. We got to get out of here. We got to get back to the boat. And so we're climbing back up to the trail, and now 2 minutes later, the crew is running up the trail screaming, "Get back to the boat! There's going to be a flash flood. Get back to the boat!"
Oh my gosh!
And in years past, every year almost someone dies in this Havasu Creek because of flash floods, because there's no soil in the Grand Canyon to really capture the water. It just comes off the rocks, comes shooting down the valleys and all. But we all got back to the boat in time. But again, there's a number of examples like this where I think in a lucid dreaming, by interacting with this inner awareness, it makes it easier in the waking state to pick up information, and there's less. The filter is more accepting. Most of us have a filter. We don't want any information from the inner knowing. That's probably why we have to have dreams. The ego's got it all under control. We don't need any information. And so that's how beautiful and practical this deeper practice of lucid dreaming can be. But again, most people would never get to this level of lucid dreaming because they just think of it as fun and games, and that's all they take it.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think you've certainly given a very good advert for it. My goodness, that last example has yeah, that's blown me away. It really has. Thank you so much. So again, I could absolutely continue talking to you for hours, but I know we need to close, and I really want to come back and dive deeper with you. But for now, where can listeners find out more about you and your work?
Right. My website is Lucid, Lucid, lucidadvice.com. And you can read about my books and the various things I do. Also, I publish for free a free online magazine with my friend Lucy Gillis in Canada. And so anyone can read this magazine that we've been producing quarterly for 25 years now, called the Lucid Dreaming Experience. And so all you have to do is go to luciddreamingmagazine.com. And every issue, I interview someone, an experienced lucid dreamer, and also we have articles, and then we have about 15 pages of reader submitted lucid dreams, because I just love to see what other people are doing with their lucid dream work.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you so much. This has been just such a treat. And I think I've been just sort of starting to dip my toe in the lucid dreaming waters, but this conversation has just convinced me it's something to really devote much more time and energy to. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks. It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you.